for the US biomass estimates, but there has since been a change in methods. But there's just a table of coefficients you look up depending on your species, and you can see it's not that hard of an equation. So this is for a black cherry that was 20.5 centimeters. And again, I just put that in an Excel spreadsheet, and I can do 3,000 trees and group them out by which group they go in, paste in the equations. It takes longer to get the data in order than it does to calculate it. So this doesn't have to be a huge undertaking. But again, some equations are quite complex, and this is nice because I only need to use a handful of them for my work, because there are only 10 to start with. So that's just an example of what a biomass equation can look like. So we talked a little bit about this morning. What pools, this is my famous carbon sink. I worked very hard on it. We talked a little about this, which pools to include. Now, if you're reporting for the UNFCCC purposes, you do have to report all of them, except it's your option on products. That's not required. So you do have to report all of them, and again, tier 1 is always an option. You use the default values right out of the book. But if you're making choices, maybe for a project and it's open to negotiation, or you're trying to decide what tiers, I did promise you we would talk a little bit about this. So you're always going to go with your live biomass, your overstory biomass. Your understory, that's really going to depend. There are some areas where the understory is quite dense and quite woody, and that might be an important component. But often it can just cost a lot of money to do. Your dead biomass pools in your soil, again, here we are about the tiers. They give you estimation options for each, so you want to go to the highest tier for which you have the resources. If you're talking about a project, you're going to have to look at that project documentation. It may be something you can negotiate when you're applying for the funding. So there's really no hard and fast set rule as to level and detail. Harvested wood products, not required, but it may be to your benefit to include them. And this is the slide I had mentioned earlier that had the underline. What you might want to think about is, do you want to establish a monitoring program? Is that something that might be a goal, sort of an ongoing monitoring program of your carbon trends? In this case, I would advise you to measure everything you can afford to measure that first time, because now you have the option going forward in the future to measure it again, and you have that baseline. Maybe you only want to measure your soils every 30 years. That's fine. But if you don't do it that first time, now you've lost that opportunity. So do you want to establish an ongoing monitoring program? Is something to think about. In that case, consider measuring as many as possible. Are you conducting a project? So if you're conducting a specific project, some of these may be requested by the project funder. If you're doing an afforestation project, forest floor is something, because you wouldn't have had any before. So forest floor is a pool that you might want to consider. It can be quite small, but some stands I sample conifers, old conifer stands in New England, have incredible amounts of carbon in the forest floor. So especially in a situation of afforestation, you may want to include pools such as the forest floor. Certainly want to measure soil. But again, in the end, cost of measurement versus the benefit of the data. That's always what it boils down to. None of this is really, aside from some of the terrain-related issues of access, it's not technically difficult. It just comes down to person hours. In terms of forest floor and soil, there are also analysis costs. The samples must be processed and sent to a lab for analysis. That soil carbon, the best price I've ever gotten is $6 per sample. Some labs, if they have to grind and prepare it, can charge you up to $15 per sample. And so that's when you would composite and mix things together to try to lower those costs. But they can add up, so you always want to think of that cost benefit. Is it worth spending the extra money? The answer may very well be yes. Okay, see, that wasn't so bad, was it? There were some equations, but they weren't too awful. Or more or less on time. So does anybody have any questions related to that material? And if not, I'm going to turn it over to Emily. She's not going to talk about carbon, so you're going to get a break. does anybody work on any haikus? Because I have one more DVD to give away, and I have to find a way to give it away. Maybe I'll make it Emily's job to award that last door prize. So maybe she has some quiz questions for you. So she's going to talk about payments for ecosystem services in a general sense, and set that stage for you, since some of you may not have that much experience with it. So we're going to take a step out of Harvard world here. If we switch to Emily's presentation.
Okay, so what are ecosystem services? There's a bunch of different definitions out there, but most basically it's the benefits people obtain from nature. And anybody want to shout out any before I show them all up on screen? Okay, well, with the Forest Service, there's the Multiple Use Sustainable Yield Act, and that lets the Forest Service focus in on 5 of these ecosystem services. And perhaps in other countries there's mandates like that to focus on certain subsections of ecosystem services. But really this falls within a larger framework of many different values. We can look at timber, rangeland, wildlife habitat, flood control, water quality, quantity, plant pollination, recreation, and then other services like having a sense of place, spiritual inspiration, aesthetic values. We don't talk about those as much, but there are also benefits from nature and ecosystem services. And these ecosystem services fall within the spectrum of being marketable or less marketable. And we know timber is, already part of, there's a strong timber market, but something like spiritual inspiration isn't as marketable. But today we'll be talking about, maybe some of the ones in the middle and how we can create these incentives for ecosystem services. And the ecosystem services also fall within a framework. This is from the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, putting them into these 4 categories. On the bottom there you have the supporting services, which kind of lay the backbone for all the other services. But we've got the provisioning services, food, fiber, which includes timber and fuel, the genetic material, natural medicines, water, the regulating ones, which are regulating air quality, carbon sequestration and storage, climate regulation, soil formation, flood control, water quality, and then those cultural and spiritual services we talked about before, including recreation, which does get priced in the market now and is responsible for a lot of money. And these ecosystem services they kind of connect the biophysical structure and process of ecosystems to human well-being. So we can first look at ecosystem function, which then leads to those ecosystem services we talked about. And then those lead to benefits, and then we can find values from those benefits and measure them in economic terms or other terms. And just as ecosystem services affect human well-being, there's many different direct and indirect drivers that are part of this whole And this is an image adapted from the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. So oftentimes decisions about natural resources have often focused on a small subset of these services, and that can lead to decisions that favor one benefit over another, and without looking at the larger spectrum. And in a public lands example, we see in these articles some of our elected leaders going more toward short-term economic gains at the expense of a broader suite of non-marketable values. So an ecosystem services framework here can really help in decision-making, making it more transparent, and really looking at a more inclusive decision process. And here's an example of a trade-off analysis. I really like this image. You can see under different scenarios how different ecosystem services might be affected. And by looking at the whole suite of ecosystem services, marketable and non-marketable, you can be better informed in decision making. And in fact, now just a US example, the Forest Service has, through a new planning rule, forest planning rule, has the authority to consider this larger suite of ecosystem service benefits, which is a really great opportunity for improving decision making. But in a private lands context, we see the same thing, where decisions about how we're managing lands focus on a small set of services, and it's hard for a private landowner to adopt this larger ecosystem services framework because the incentives aren't quite there. So in this image here, we have, if there's a private landowner that's doing something really good on the land, having a positive environmental impact, the private landowners do not benefit from producing the public goods, but and the other people, beneficiaries, aren't paying for those services. So the landowner is providing those services free of charge. And in economics terms, that would be a positive externality on folks, not the landowner. But in another case where the landowner isn't managing the land very well, they might not be penalized for those negative impacts. And for the other people, they might be left to pay the costs. So you see that the market incentives and market signals aren't lining up in a good way here. So, if we realign market forces to invest in both the production of ecosystem goods and services, maybe we could create a positive feedback loop to increase investments and production of ecosystem goods. And I'll just give an example here with, we'll look at two scenarios. One, a private landowner makes a decision to use their land primarily for timber harvesting. The landowner, harvests the timber and sells it to a timber user. And in return, the timber user is charged and money is given back to the landowner. And then the landowner can use that money to do future work on their land in an investment. But in the case of ecosystem services, non-marketable ecosystem services, like we talked about earlier, the landowner may be doing good things on the land, providing services to service users, and there's no charge for that, there's no payment, and they don't have money to reinvest into their land. And payment for ecosystem services schemes try to create a way where we can continue this loop, and perhaps the service users can help be more connected to the landowners and perhaps help pay for the ecosystem service. So what are payments for ecosystem services? A common definition that I see a lot is this one. It's a voluntary transaction in which a well-defined environmental service or form of land use is likely to secure that service is bought by at least one ecosystem service buyer from a minimum of one ecosystem service provider, if and only if the provider continues to supply that service. And so just a couple notes here. When we say voluntary, that could be still within a regulatory framework where there's a law that's, giving the option for a payment. But it's, in these cases, it's still voluntary whether or not to use, to exceed a cap or something. And we'll go into detail in a bit about that. And also another note, bought by at least one ecosystem service buyer. And it's important to note this could be monetary or non-monetary. Sometimes there could be a payment in terms of strengthened property rights or other payments. And that last point, if and only if the provider continues to supply that service. And that really gets to the additionality. And so we want that payment to cause the benefit to occur where it wouldn't have occurred otherwise. And that's key in payment for ecosystem services. And here's an image from Business for a Better World. It shows that these payment for ecosystem services projects are happening all across the globe, and in some cases the United States is importing these success stories from across the globe back to the United States. So there's some real lessons learned across the globe. So what are the drivers of ecosystems demand, of payment for ecosystem services? We have private markets where this is like the timber market where there's already demand for timber and it's sold in a normal marketplace. There's also government incentives, which creates demand on private lands. And in the United States, we have a number of these programs where the government will provide monetary incentives to private landowners to generate ecosystem services. So this could be, there's programs for oftentimes agricultural land users who will conserve their land instead of using it for agriculture or something like that. And next, environmental regulation. This creates reason to pay for ecosystem services if you can't emit 1 more ounce of, for instance, for 1 more ounce of air pollutant, you can either reduce your emissions or buy a credit from somewhere else. And we see that this is a classic cap and trade scenario. And we see that with air and water pollutant discharge, with carbon, and with nutrient and temperature in water. And we also see this with mitigation banks, with threatened and endangered species and wetlands. And we also see this sometimes with where local governments set caps on how much area can be developed or how much impervious surface can be in an area. And the last is goodwill, and this isn't insignificant. There have been a lot of purchases of ecosystem services that aren't driven by regulation, and they're not government incentives, but it's either people or companies or other entities that want to do this out of goodwill. So, okay, I'm going to ask audience if you have ideas about who buyers of ecosystem services might be. Okay, Okay, so we have drinking water providers in the United States and elsewhere have been buyers of ecosystem services. It's kind of the green infrastructure, gray infrastructure approach, where a lot of water providers are understanding the role of forests and upstream areas in providing good drinking water quality. And sewage treatment plants, we'll get into some examples there later. Developers, governments, developers, and polluters and energy companies, and citizens and communities for the goodwill. And types of markets. We have private deals. This is where business, non-governmental organizations, and conservation groups provide payments to landowners for philanthropic, public relations, or ethical reasons, or to protect an investment. So a couple examples, a developer might pay a landowner to maintain an attractive view, an interest group might pay for hunting leases, or a